Refilwe Mtweni was elected NCOP chair, while Kenneth Mpumalanga was elected NCOP of the Chief Whip. Cyril Ramaphosa has been re-elected as the President of South Africa. Toward Didiza of the ANC elected as the new Speaker of the National Assembly. Didiza won with 284 votes to the 49 received by the economic freedom fighters Veronica Mente. Very good afternoon to you. It is Saturday. Welcome to the Week in Review. I am Sebenzile Nkambule. We're coming to you live from our studios in Auckland Park in Johannesburg. We invite you to be part of the show, and you can give us a ring by calling our studio line on 011-714-0680, 0681 or 0682 during the course of the next 2 hours to give your comments on all the big stories we're covering. We start here this afternoon. 54 permanent delegates were sworn in at the National Council of Provinces this morning, where Refilwe Mtweni was elected as the chair of the NCOP. Our reporter, Bulelani Philip, is standing by for us. Bulelani, a very good afternoon to you. And I understand that you are standing with the newly elected whip of the NCOP, one Kenny Mpumalanga.
Good afternoon and welcome back here at the Cape Town International Convention Center. One thing, a short sitting, just 2 hours, unlike the 16 hours that was convened by the National Assembly yesterday. And again, another interesting thing is that the position of the chairperson as well as that of the National Council of Provinces Chief Whip were both elected unopposed. Of course, the new NCOP Chief Whip is Kenny Mpumalanga, who's standing next to me. And congratulations to you, Mr. Mpumalanga. And basically, what can the delegates of the NCOP expect from your leadership?
Greetings to yourself and the viewers of the SABC. Indeed, from the Chief Whip of the National Council of Provinces, the expectation is that we are going to ensure that there is harmony in terms of pursuing our priority in relation to provincial interest. Secondly, we will ensure that indeed the agenda of local government matters is also on the agenda of the national platform. We do so informed by the fact that there are various pieces of legislations, whether it is Section 77 and Section 76 and Section 75 of our Constitution that time and again land on the table of the National Council of Provinces. But what is more important is the fact that in our quest to do lawmaking, in our quest to exercise oversight, we are going to ensure that at the center of that will be public participation, to ensure that indeed the people of this country are at the center of accountability, ensuring that we hold both three spheres of government accountable.
All right, now the stigma that this second House of Parliament has carried over the years is that we've been accused of just rubber stamping what the National Assembly approves. How do you intend to make sure that you shake off that stigma?
The stigma, I suspect, might be unfounded, but the reality of the matter is that in terms of the Minority Procedures Act, mainly when we deal with Section 76, we engage with the provincial government, we engage with provincial legislatures, and there is ample opportunity to the public to be able to make input in terms of the legislation that finds itself to the National Council of Province. Key to that is the negotiating mandates, where provinces are given an opportunity to reflect and negotiate with other provinces in terms of their respective position in relation to those legislations that we are dealing with. In addition to that, provinces are also given an opportunity to deal with final mandate. So by the time the legislation mandate arrives on our agenda, when we take them to the plenary, it had gone through various stages: negotiating mandate, final mandate, interaction by the members of the respective committees. But more than that, we even engage and invite the departments to respond to issues that might have been raised by the public during the public participation, during the public inputs. The reality of the matter is that this is one of the busiest houses that you can ever find, because if a matter affects local government, they must be heard. If a matter affects interests of traditional leadership, they must be heard. If the matter affects the interests of provinces, provinces must be heard. So therefore, in terms of the lawmaking processes, I suspect such narrative might be unfounded.
Lastly, let's come back to today's proceedings. Why was the position of the deputy chairperson not voted on? Can you explain to the viewers at home?
On the agenda of today's meeting, because the election of the chairpersons, both the national chairperson and also the deputy chair, is governed by Rule 6 of the National Council of Provinces. And what is important is for provincial positions to be related, to be given to the House before we can pronounce on the election of the deputy chairperson. We had the mandate from provinces, all the 9 provinces, in relation to the position of the national chairperson. But in relation to the deputy chairperson, that matter still needs to be canvassed by the provinces, so the province will still be given an opportunity to interact with that mandate. And once they are done, then we will place it on the agenda of the National Council of Province.
Let me be naughty. Will it go to the DA?
No, look, it's a matter that definitely, given the political reality that prevails, the reality of the matter is that DA is not only our partners in the GNU, there are other partners. So that is a matter that will be guided by the discussion that it unfolds on the agenda of our leadership that are part and parcel of the GNU. But like as you said,
all right,
prevailing condition dictates that we govern together, unity in diversity.
All right, thank you so much. All the best, Kenny Mpumalanga, the newly elected National Council of Provinces Chief Whip. We're going to cross back to you in studio.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bulelani. Let's also bring in SABC News reporter Natasha Piri, who is also in Cape Town and has been covering proceedings there. Natasha, a very good afternoon to you. Who do you have with you?
Thank you so much, Sebenzile. I'm actually joined by the Premier of the Mpumalanga province, Mr. Mandla Ndlovu. Mr. Ndlovu, thank you so much for joining us on SABC News. First and foremost, you are now the Premier of Mpumalanga. How are you feeling your top priorities in the province?
No, greetings to our viewers. I think what is very important is that people must know that the ANC has its own manifesto with 6 priorities. When we were conducting door-to-door, people were telling us about unemployment in the province, about poverty, cost of living, and that our people are yearning for water. We said, as an organization, that we are going to implement our 6 priorities. So there is nothing that the Premier is going to implement in any other province, because we accepted that these priorities are the priorities that all of us were going to pay special attention. So I am going, as a Premier of the province, to align these priorities to our priorities of government. We are going to convene our Lekgotla, where all stakeholders are going to be invited. In that Lekgotla, that's where we are going to align the priorities of the ANC to priorities of government. but we are paying special attention on unemployment in the province currently. We have got close to 1,250,000 people that are working, and our target is to have 2 million people.
And in terms of timelines?
Hello?
In terms of the timelines, your target is to have 2 million people working by?
By 2030. That is our target, by 2030. And that means that each and every year we must have to create roughly close to 100,000. We are saying that we want to reduce poverty in Mpumalanga to roughly 5%. We want to build the economy of the province again to roughly 5-6%. So we are ready. We sign a social contract with the people of the province, and we are going to respect that contract.
You're at the first sitting of the NCOP, and the biggest criticism of the NCOP is that it always rubber stamps what the National Assembly actually does. What do you think could be done to actually strengthen such bodies like this?
Rubber stamping? I don't think that this concept exists in our vocabulary. We don't have this concept called rubber stamping. We're not rubber stamping. We have deployed here credible comrades, that means the I-craft principle. Comrades that are committed, comrades that are disciplined, comrades that are honest, comrades that are equal to the task. Like the chairperson that has been appointed today is a former premier of Mpumalanga. We know this chairperson, that she's an honest member of the organization, a disciplined cadre. She is always democratic because she belongs to a democratic organization. So it means that she will allow people to participate in this august body. So there is no person that is going to rubber stamp any decision here. They are going to engage.
And what other qualities do you think that she could actually bring to actually strengthen the NCOP as the chair, or the newly appointed chair of the NCOP?
Yeah, we said as an organization that there were just few problems in the past where the chamber was turned into a circus. If you deploy clowns to a palace, you must know that the clown will not become a king, but the palace will become a circus. So we are happy that she's going to be here to ensure that all these members that are participating here in this chamber, that all of them, they must respect this important body. All of them, they must behave in a way that it will unite the chamber, in a way that it will assist the people of South Africa.
Mr. Mandandlovu, thank you so much for your time. Sebenzile, I don't know if you'll just permit me. I'd actually spotted the premier of Limpopo, Dr. Popi Ramathuba, and I actually wanted to have a word with her on her appointment as the premier of Limpopo. Here she is right now. If I can just... actually, Sebenzile, before I actually go to... Can you just please bring her here? Before I go to Usisipopi, let me actually just speak to the newly appointed chair of the NCOP, the former premier of Mpumalanga. Ausrifile, how are you feeling, and what more could you do to actually strengthen the body of the NCOP?
Well, for me is to say I'm very much grateful, and I thank my organization for recognizing my capacity and trusting me that I will be able to manage this important body of our spheres of government. And therefore, ours, of course, as you're correctly saying, is to make sure that the transformation agenda, that of transforming the lives of our people, it's been propelled forward. Therefore, our role is very critical. We are interfacing between the provinces as well as our National Assembly in making sure that the legislation that are being enacted, they are in the best interest of the community at large, and also to make sure, of course, that through the oversight, our people are not being prejudiced and they are not being robbed of the service deliveries that they are so yearning for and deserving. We all know by now that what is it that our people want. We've traversed the length and the breadth of our provinces. They have spoken to us. They even spoke on the 29th through the polls to say that this is what we need. Yes, in the 7th administration, it's quite a very interesting administration that will see the working together of political parties in making sure that we deliver to our people at large. And this House remains very instrumental just in making sure that we interface through intergovernmental and coordinated way with our provinces as well as the National House. That's it.
And you said something very interesting inside the House. You said that your role, or the role of the NCOP, would be to foster and maintain dynamic relationships between Parliament and the provinces.
Definitely, precisely what I was saying just now, to emphasize and punctuate on that point, because us being at the center of this, our role is important. That whatever that is happening at the National Assembly, particularly in the executive, it does find expression in the manner in which services are being provided to our people. Wherever there are discrepancies or disjunctures, it is us. We should be the voice of reason on behalf of the people of South Africa at large to say that we express their views, because they've entrusted us with that responsibility. It could have been anyone being elected to come and serve here. Hence, I was saying earlier on, we have traversed the breadth and the length of South Africa. We've heard our people, they have spoken, and ours is to make sure that we come here and deliver just as they said.
Ma'am, thank you so much and all the best with your new roles. Let me just quickly go to the newly elected Premier of Limpopo, Dr. Poppy Rabotoba. Congratulations. But early on when I spoke to you, you had said that your first priority would be to create jobs in the province. And this is the province where the unemployment rate in Limpopo is over 40%.
Yes, if you look at the expanded unemployment rate, where Stats SA look at people who are sitting at home, who have given up on looking for jobs, it goes beyond, it's around 41%. But if you look at the real people who are actively looking for jobs, it has gone down from 36% during the COVID time to recently around 30%. But that is still a concern. So earlier on, I was not saying necessarily we'll create the jobs, because we can't come and say this is the industry that we have established as the Limpopo province for jobs. But all what we are saying is that you should understand that we've got a responsibility as government to make sure that we create those conducive environment to make sure that jobs are being created. For instance, we are a province that is rich in natural resources. If you look at the number of minerals that we have as a province, the challenge is that we are exporting everything that we are producing. So we need to move beyond production, because even though production is creating jobs, they are not in a massive scale like you would get jobs if you go further towards the processing of those minerals and towards the beneficiations where economists talk of secondary and tertiary economy. So for that, we need to prioritize it. And it's not only in the mining sector, even in the agriculture, because I was looking at our contribution to the GDP as a province, and I realized that in terms of mining, we are at 7.2%, which is encouraging. However, when you come to the number of jobs that mining sector is producing in the province, it is even far less than trade, than even agriculture, because we are not doing those processing and beneficiations. That is why that, you can come and tell me that ZZ2 produces more tomatoes than anyone I can think of in this country. But we don't even have a factory for tomato sauce. And it is in the production of tomato sauce where we are talking about industrialization. Because the problem with us is that we've been using big English, industrialization and what. So my priority is that we must kill those big terminology and leave what Krisani used to say, that don't talk of socialism being a big terminology. It's just simple. People want the economy to be in the hands of masses. People want health. People want a quality education. People want houses. People want electricity, want water. So earlier on, I was saying to you, if through, for instance, mining, agro-processing and tourism, we can be able to support this, what I was saying to you earlier on, as government, some of the investors who want to mine in the province are saying they don't have proper infrastructure, like your water supply, your roads, your network infrastructure. That's where we come in and assist, working with the private sector. We will be able to do that, and that is our priority. Like I told you earlier on, that if we win on that, I think we will reduce the burden of people wanting houses, reducing the burden of people wanting everything for free. They want social grants because they are not employed. Get them to educated graduates, let them get the jobs, then you will see, you will even reduce in the demands. And by the way, people who are working, chances of them to get ill, it's slim than those who are not working.
Premier, thank you so much for your time. I guess the Premier of Limpopo having big plans there for the province. Of course, this wraps up and sums up most of the reactions that we actually got from the floor after the first NCOP sitting. Sebenzile, we will be going to a briefing of the ANC shortly. And of course, as SABC News, we will be giving you the latest updates in regards to that. But that said, it's back to you in studio.
Thank you very much, SABC News reporter Natasha Piri, live from Cape Town. And earlier, we spoke to Bulelani Philip as well, as they've been covering proceedings at the NCOP this morning. Now, looking back at the culmination of what's just transpired yesterday, as well as this morning, we're joined by constitutional law expert, political analyst and author, Professor Richard Calland. Prof, thank you for your time with us this afternoon in the Weekend Review. At first glance, looking back at the last 30 years and now the 7th administration, what would you say is important to note about our constitutional democracy given these events?
Well, that's a great question, and there's many different ways of answering it, and many points one could make. I would pick just a small handful. First of all, we're having, as someone pointed out in the National Assembly yesterday, a peaceful transfer of power. And that's a really important thing, and it shouldn't be taken for granted. There have been so-called mature democracies in recent years. I'm thinking of the United States, where the loser has refused to accept defeat, has encouraged his supporters to attack an institution of democracy. What we saw here in the last 2 weeks was the ANC accepting what must have been a very painful setback for it, losing its majority, a big swing against it from 57% to 40%, and yet taking it with complete equanimity in many ways. Secondly, I think we've seen mature leadership over the last 2 weeks. Coalition politics is not easy. It's a particular craft. And we've seen at local government level just how easy it is to mess it up. I think that the political leadership of this country is rising to the challenge of putting their interests partly to one side, securing a deal that will work for the country as a whole. The third thing, as your various interviews just showed here, is that none of this changes the objective conditions on the ground. Materially, things are very difficult for many, many people in this country. And so the job of the new government, now that is beginning to take shape, is to recognise the intensity of the crisis and to govern well and to be very responsive to the needs of people. They will have to hit the ground running. They'll have to prove their credibility and their competence very, very quickly. Otherwise, confidence will fall rapidly in relation to this new government.
Prof, we're obviously all running with GNU that this is a government of national unity. But is it really, even though the intention perhaps initially would have been that we know that some political parties opted out, meaning the results that we're looking at here is a multi-party coalition government here. Is that in fact the case? And what will that actually mean for those who are in fact hoping for a GNU in its truest form, but instead we've ended up with the result that we have now, as we saw transpire yesterday?
Well, to be perfectly and brutally honest with you, the idea of a government of national unity in the 1994 conception was never going to happen. It was always a fiction. And the reason I say that was because in 1994, it was prescribed by law, in effect. Part of the constitutional negotiations that led to the settlement and the first election in 94 was that, as the interim constitution said, there should be power sharing in a particular way between a particular group of political parties. There was no such prescription here. This is, as the agreement that's been signed says, an entirely voluntary agreement. It's a form of coalition. Parties have accepted, the ANC in particular, that they have to share power now. They don't have a majority, and therefore they've had to, and this is the non-voluntary part, they've had to, in a sense, share power. But one last point on that.
Professor Cullen, let me interrupt you, please.
Yes.
We do have the Chief Justice. We have to go back to Cape Town. Our reporter, Bulelani Phillips, is standing by with the Chief Justice Zondo. Bulelani?
All right, thank you so much, Sebenzile. Of course, the two sittings of the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces are now behind us, and they have been held successfully. The person who has been presiding over those historic sittings is the Chief Justice, Raymond Zondo, who now joins me. Chief Justice, thank you so much for your time. Firstly, you must be breathing a sigh of relief that these two sittings actually went without any hitch.
I am. I was very concerned until yesterday morning. It was only yesterday morning before we started that I felt, no, actually everything will be fine. Before that, I was very concerned. And yesterday it took quite long, but it was worthwhile.
And the 16 hours, did you manage to stay right through and not sleep?
Yeah, no, I didn't sleep. We managed, and everything went very well. Everybody was very cooperative. I got this sense that everybody wanted the right thing to be done. Everybody wanted the whole process to be successful. I didn't get a feeling that there was anybody who had come here to spoil things. I didn't get a feeling that there was somebody who had come to disrupt, which was very welcome.
Should the ballot papers be counted in private, or should they be counted on the floor? What do you make of that debate?
Well, no, I think they raised a legitimate issue. It's just a pity that they had never raised the issue because the rule had been there for many years, you know. But otherwise, it's good for transparency that people can observe, because then when the result is given, if they say no, we are happy, then you know they are happy because they were part of observing.
As the Chief Justice, I know you shouldn't be encroaching on the side of the legislature, but I would like to get your opinion on whether, what kind of advice would you give to our current leaders, given the current climate where there is no outright winner and they have to work together for the good of the country?
Well, I can't give any specific advice other than simply to say they are aware of their constitutional obligations. They are aware of the oath of office that they took. They need to always respect their oath. They need to always make sure that they comply with the Constitution. That is very, very important, including on the constitutional obligations of Parliament to hold the executive accountable. That's very important. Oversight, very important. So that's as far as I can go.
Lastly, before I let you go, I know we have a limited time. There was an incident in the swearing in of members in KwaZulu-Natal where there seems to have been some duplication, or people were removed and others came in. Have you had sight of those reports, and what do you make of those?
No, I have not had sight of those reports. I am aware that the Judge President of KwaZulu-Natal did, I saw a missed call. She called me during the day yesterday, but I only saw the message in the night. So I haven't got those reports yet, but it may well be that she wanted to give me those reports.
All right, thank you so much. Chief Justice Raymond Zondo has had a tough 2 days in presiding over both the sittings of the National Assembly as well as the National Council of Provinces. For now, we are going to cross back to you in studio.
Thank you very much, Bulelani Philip, speaking to the Chief Justice Zondo. I still have constitutional law expert Professor Richard Calland joining us, and apologies for that interjection, Prof. I'm sure you appreciate that we need to take events as they happen live. Perhaps reflect on the Chief Justice comments, his performance in the National Assembly yesterday. We saw leading up to the elections as well, a lot of litigation. I suppose that also contributed to concerns about whether or not there would indeed be a peaceful transfer of power.
Well, it was interesting to note that Chief Justice put out an amended form of rules of engagement for yesterday, and he seemed to be anticipating trouble because those rules were very clear about what would and wouldn't happen if people tried to disrupt proceedings. And whilst the EFF, yes, they delayed things yesterday in a sense by putting forward their candidates, knowing, I presume, that they had little chance of winning those three elections for Speaker, Deputy Speaker and President, I think they were trying to make a point. And the point they were trying to make is that we're here, we may not be in power, we may have been pushed to one side by this coalition arrangement, but we are going to be a serious party of opposition. And Malema, very interestingly, as you know, the night before that first sitting on Thursday night, said we are now going to be a mature party of opposition. We're not going to be storming the stage, is literally what he said. And indeed, yesterday they took points of order, of course, but there was no disruption of that sort. So it may be that we're entering a new phase. Of course, MK were not present yesterday, and it would seem that MK in many respects are mimicking some of the tactics that the EFF have used in recent years. And if MK finally take up those 58 seats in due course, it will be interesting to see whether they seek to disrupt proceedings or whether they also join the club in terms of what seems to be a more competitive but also a more mature seventh parliament of our democracy.
Going back to the earlier conversation about the GNU of 94 and what we have now, we're already hearing people talking about selling out, that the ANC has sold out once again. Do you share this sentiment, and perhaps what might be the market similarities or differences between the GNU of 94 and this configuration of 2024?
Well, I've already made the narrow point, which is that the GNU of 94 was prescribed by law. It was in the interim constitution. This was a voluntary concession of power in the sense that the ANC, and this was the point I was about to make before the Chief Justice was interviewed, and that was that the ANC could, with 40%, have governed as a minority government. What they sought to do in the last week or so was to put together a sufficiently large and, from their perspective, they hope, stable an accountable coalition arrangement. And having been privy to some of the conversations that went on, it was a very difficult conversation, but for the ANC, it was a fork in the roads for them in many respects, almost existential, having to choose what sort of party they want to be, not just for the next 5 years, but probably far longer. In the end, they've gone for a centralist approach. They've gone for working with parties that are equally committed to the Constitution and the rule of law. And I think that's really very important. The heat of the debate inside the ANC was whether this was, yes, in inverted commas, a sellout. And why would it be put in those terms? I suppose because the DA is seen as anti-transformation, it's got white leadership and so on. But one shouldn't forget the fact that it was the ANC that swallowed up the National Party back in the day, 20 years ago, in the early part of the century.
Let's also talk about how, I suppose, each political party, the type of role that they now have to play, right? There's a question of, well, who then takes up the role of official opposition? We saw the EFF almost assume that role yesterday already. But should the MKP take up their seats, they effectively would become the official opposition. Does that limit or box in the Democratic Alliance, for example, on how far they can go in criticizing, as they have been over the years, and in fact, mostly so, justifiably criticizing the failures or the shortcomings of the governing party? Will they be able to speak out in the same fashion going forward?
Well, the strategic choice that the Democratic Alliance faced in the last week was whether to shift their position from their original positions, I understood it, which was to not be in cabinet and not to share executive power, but rather to take up positions such as the Speaker or key positions in Parliament and to play an oversight role. And that would have been a different sort of agreement. It would have been effectively what we call a confidence and supply agreement rather than a coalition agreement. Technically, a coalition agreement is where there's an agreement to share executive power. In the end, that's what we've got. And it's not quite right either to call it a grand coalition, because that would just be the DA and the ANC.
Yeah.
Clearly, we've got the IFP as well. And that adds to the sense that this is a serious block of parties at the centre of our political spectrum. You've got the broadly social democratic ANC of Ramaphosa and the renewal camp. You've got the centre-right formations of IFP and DA, and together, of course, they add up to about 64%, 65% of the seats in Parliament, and therefore, obviously, of the electorate that voted for those three parties. There may be some little mice and rats, so to speak, that are added to the mix in the next few days. We'll have to wait and see. And that will complicate matters, but it will also add to the veneer that this is more than just a grand coalition.
Absolutely. Prof, we'll have to park at the word of time, unfortunately. Professor Richard Callan, thank you very much for your time with us this afternoon. The African National Congress is currently briefing the media. Let's step into that live briefing.
Elected the leadership of Parliament. The ANC congratulates Comrade Tokoti Tiza on the election as the Speaker of the National Assembly, Comrade Refile Mtsweni as Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, and Dr. Annelie Lotriat as the Deputy Speaker. We are confident that they will perform their duties capably and diligently. We also congratulate our Chief Whip, Comrade Mtumiseni Ntuli. Comrade Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa has been re-elected the President of the Republic of South Africa with 83% support from members of the National Assembly. This overwhelming support for the President Ramaphosa represents a vote of confidence in the resilience and stability of our democracy. The ANC congratulates Comrade Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa on his election as President of the Republic. His election reflects the tremendous confidence of South Africans across society in his leadership and in his ability to lead the country into a new era. The result of yesterday's election of leadership for two critical arms of state, legislatures and executive, affirms the ANC's initiative to advocate for the coming together in government of national unity in the interests of all South Africans. The parties working together to take forward an inclusive government of national unity have embraced a statement, quote unquote, of intent of the 2024 government of national unity, which outlines foundational principles, a basic minimum program of priorities and modalities of the GNU. Parties continue to make inputs into the GNU statement of intent in order to reflect the broad consensus that should characterize its formation and modalities. The statement of intent categorically places the needs of South African people first, as expressed in the proposed minimum program for the 7th administration, including the focus on economic inclusion, industrialization, transformation and job creation, protection of workers and women's rights, improving and extending basic services, and tackling the high cost of living, investing in people through education, skills and health, the fight against corruption and crime, and progressive foreign policy that reflects our national values and interests. Above all, parties to the GNU agrees that as we enter the next decade of freedom, we must work together and move decisively to tackle the triple challenges of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. As a precondition for a non-racial, non-sexist, united, democratic, and prosperous South Africa, the parties have made a commitment to an all-inclusive national dialogue process with parties, civil society, labor, business, and other sectors to discuss critical challenges facing the nation. The national dialogue process will seek to develop a national social compact that enables the country to meet the overarching aspirations of the National Development Plan, to eliminate poverty and significantly reduce inequality towards 2030. The ANC in the coming days will continue engagement with all parties as we move towards the steps to form the government of national unity. As has already been announced, the President will be inaugurated on the 19th of August 2024 and thereafter will announce an inclusive GNU cabinet. All these positive developments of the past 2 days have brought huge relief and a renewed sense of hope across the length and breadth of our beloved country, South Africa. We have demonstrated that we are ready to set aside our political differences, find innovative ways to work together in the interest of the people of our nation and our people as a whole. We will do more together, working with all political parties and listening to the people of South Africa through their formations in civil society and broadly, even through the media, about their interest and their criticism and constructive criticism of government and the direction we are taking as political formations in the country. Yesterday, we have reached a major breakthrough by electing a parliament after the election. Despite our differences and despite the opposition even from within, we have shown maturity to the world that South Africa indeed is not a failed democracy. It is maturing and it is at a level of the advanced democracies in the African continent and the world. And Nelson Mandela was smiling on us yesterday that the vision set from the inception of 1994 as a foundation of moving South Africa forward in the manner in which he has done at that particular moment is still alive even today. This country is full of possibilities, and this was a moment to be celebrated by everyone. And for that, we say, long live South Africa, long live. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Just in order to be able to support colleagues, I am going to ask that we identify.
All right, we come out live there from that briefing by the ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula. We continue covering, of course, proceedings from yesterday as well as today, but also reflecting on various political developments and legal battles as well that we saw with the MKP as well. Let me welcome my guest in studio, political analyst Dr. Hlengiwe Ndlovu, joining us this afternoon. Before we jump into MKP Jabulani Khumalo matters, perhaps let's get your thoughts on the briefing which is heard from the ANC's Secretary General saying that Nelson Mandela was smiling on the party yesterday because of what happened, but yesterday being a major breakthrough, but interestingly as well, saying that the parties that form part of this GNU have signed a statement of intent, inclusive of various issues as well, but also have agreed to a national dialogue.
Good afternoon, Sebenzile, and good afternoon to your viewers at home. Yes, very interesting views coming there from the Secretary General of the ANC, and the statement that Nelson Mandela was smiling at them. I think to give credit to the processes, I think it has been quite a difficult moment for everyone in South Africa. Also for the ANC in trying, to have these different dialogues, and also against all the backlash that is in the public space and what it means this moment, and seeing them successfully sitting and being able, to start the processes. I think all eyes were on that first sitting of the First National Assembly of the 7th Administration, and I think what it means then to say the democracy has matured, it also depends on where are you sitting on the side of this democracy and what does maturity mean, especially in this case. But I think we do have to give credit to the successful sitting of the First National Assembly and the processes, given all the challenges that have been there that we were looking at.
Indeed. Let's now just go back to the issue we had, of course, invited you to chat about here. This we saw earlier this week, the High Court in the Western Cape dismissing Jabulani Khumalo's attempt, of course, to join the sitting, the first sitting of the National Assembly on Friday. Seemingly, this battle hasn't ended just yet. So question marks as to what we're going to see from the MKP. We know across various legislatures, they showed up yesterday. They were sworn in. We still, of course, have question marks as to what will happen on the national front. But just some reflections on his battle and perhaps relentlessness here in trying to claim back control of the MKP.
Yes, absolutely. I think all eyes are on the MK. We were, peacefully or maybe anxiously waiting to see if they were going to join the National Assembly yesterday, of which they did. And, looking at this backly, really, it's so unfortunate because this is a party that has just emerged. But at the same time, the work that they've done, or maybe the inroads that they've made in these elections suggests that they've done some work.
Let me just ask you to pause there, please, Dr. Ndlovu. We have to go back to Cape Town, back to that press briefing that the ANC is holding.
I'll start with Mdu and with Nomvula, and then I will level up. If there's any question you want to respond to.
Not at this stage, COVID SG.
Okay, Nomvula.
Not at this stage.
No, thank you very much. I think what you have raised about the alliance, alliance partners have been taken on board from inception post the elections outcomes. And we also had another interaction with the alliance post the National Executive Committee meeting. And through the alliance secretariat, we continue to interact. And at the technical level, they've also been able to make their own submissions and concerns. What has been an issue raised previously by the alliance was primarily at a time before we interacted with them. But out of the political council of the alliance, everything was understood. For example, the issue about the protection of the workers' rights, that is legislated. It is within the laws of our country and in the constitution. The issues that are related to possible change of policies, it was also appreciated by the alliance that we now are going to have a political council that will deal with these issues. But in the very understanding of the GNU, no party has a singular authority to change the current existing laws. And finally, on the alliance, one of the things we have agreed on is that beyond the national dialogue, there would also be an interaction with our structures, with the NEC being deployed together with the Alliance national leaders to go and brief our respective structures. Where we stand now, the Alliance is on board. The Alliance has even made an input onto the very statement that is actually out there in the public, and that is a demonstration of how we have painstakingly made sure that we don't leave anyone behind, including our alliance partners. Thank you.
Thank you very much, DSG. Bloomberg, what will ANC do now? I thought we have answered that question through what we have done since the announcement of the results. We went to the National Executive Committee, and then the National Executive Committee gave us a mandate to go and talk to political parties about the government of national unity, which is what we have done. We went to talk to political parties in exploratory discussions. Some were keen, in majority, and amenable to the government of national unity and raised strategic and tactical questions. Some were not interested in it. Two parties were not interested to be part of it. They wanted a grand coalition. A grand coalition, it means a party that works with parties or a single party to form government. And when it is convenient to themselves, some try to throw in ideology. It is very difficult to deal with people who deal with ideology on the basis of the change of weather. When it suits them, they are Marxists. They want state intervention. When the weather changes, they are something else. And I don't want to mention those political parties because their flip-flopping is well written in history. And the ANC have been very consistent, even where we have lost and we had a choice to work with the Democratic Alliance. As the main parties that have been voted in majority, we have not worked with them in the interest of the people, and that has taught us a lesson that give the people what they want and then you will govern well. And then even in those instances, we did not eschew ideology for political convenience. We remain consistent. Now, it is very difficult in this particular instance to deal with political parties that are like that. And then there are very few, of course, when it was because they wanted a deal for themselves, not a deal for the people, but they used ideology to define what kind of deal do they actually want. And you know that the history of this country is littered with experiences of coalitions for the past decade. And you know these political parties, where did they stand in relation to these particular matters? So where is consistency, where is ideology? So when you make tactical choices to advance your political interests, ideology doesn't matter. It matters now because you want some of your people to become meaningful in a government, ministers, deputy president. Because you will then say, if you are consistent in ideology, because the option of going to the benches and become a backbencher, even the ANC considered. Out of all the models that I briefed you about right from the inception, we had three models. The first model was a grand coalition, and then the second one was a minority government, and the third one was a unity government. And then we remained with one. So we didn't just jump all the hurdles and then became number one. Government of national unity became number one. We interrogated the models, the risks, and the implications. And that's what the ANC have done. So other political parties became philosophical and then wanted to challenge the results. We respect their right to do so. And then others brought red lines that this and that should not happen. Let me tell you, the most talked about political party is the DA. The DA brought red lines, and I'm happy to have a one-on-one discussion with you to tell you about the most difficult questions in the negotiations, which we may not finish in this press conference, and they are very interesting. You will write a book about them. So we will need a one-on-one with all of you about that. That is very important. All of these comrades in front here were part and parcel of the negotiating team, which was very much interesting, including party by party and what were the main differences. DA came, and then when we met as political formations, that look, to us this and that should not actually happen, and all of that. So we said, no, it's within your right, and they respected the fact that some of the red lines is actually their own outline, but it does not mean that it must guide the ANC. The ANC is an independent organization. And we agreed on the fundamentals. What is it that is fundamental is that, do we want to work for South Africa, all of us? And what is it that must actually guide us in relation to that working together? And then the talks began on the basis of that. Do we want stability? And then do we want the economy that is growing and that create jobs and all of that? That's what is important. And then there was no condition like remove so and so, and then we can talk. Then the talks began. So the talks in their very nature, when you talk to your strategic opponent, it's not about that you come with a bucket of things that will be agreed upon. It's an undertaking to an attack. Undertaking is a give and take. It is full and infested with compromises. And then that is it. But the fundamental principle is that you work together to advance the interest of the people of South Africa first. And that is what took us to where we are today. So all other political parties interrogated this and that and so on. And it was a very cordial, matured political discussion. And we will want to keep it as such. And beyond that, talks, we firmed up our position that the right thing to do here, with our majority, let's work for South Africa. Remember, we've got 6 million. We can decide what we want to do. We can't go to anyone begging with a cap in the hand. We decided that let's work for South Africa. Let's work with everybody who want to work with us and who want to work for South Africa's interest. And on that, we did not back down. And we went to political parties, and majority agreed, as it is reflected in the election of the president. Remember, now we are no longer talking where do you stand and all of that. It's a question of where do we stand in relation to what we need for progress of South Africa going forward. Even those who constituted themselves as a progressive formation inside got depleted when it came to the president. It showed that it is not a monolithic group of people. Their independence vary from one matter to the other, and that's it. So we've done a lot. Now we passed the biggest not hurdle, the testing moment of the legislature and electing a president. Now we are going to a government of national unity. And every political party and everybody will want to see how truthful is the ANC in terms of its commitment and what it promised to the people of South Africa. And that is going to be the test in time. And it is a moment where we characterize as engagement with political parties, small and big, about this government of national unity. So that work, as I explained to you, is going to continue in the next couple of days. The DC against Zuma will continue. Nothing has changed. It will continue. We said that before the elections that it must be postponed till after the elections. That disciplinary process will continue. If we are going to bend on the fundamentals for political convenience, the ANC will not exist as a party. Even at the moment where we've got 40%, that DC will continue. And it cannot be changed. So because if that DC must not continue, then members of the ANC will say those who have been subjected to the authority of the disciplinary process and discipline of the organization, why should I not be subjected to DC when it actually chooses people and all of that? So the DC will continue. How will ANC regroup? We will answer that question. It is very important. We characterize this period as a setback. From a setback, you can move to a disaster. So the fact that we have suffered a setback, it means the people have given us a chance. And 6 million people said, continue to govern, but govern with others. You don't have a majority. So in itself, it must be analyzed properly and politically. And the liberation movement must not die in our hands. People are saying all sorts of things about the engagement with the Democratic Alliance and everybody else. I'll come to that particular point. But I'm saying the ANC will take a dipstick politically and otherwise to look at this moment and what it represents with empirical evidence. Let me share with you something that we never shared with you even before the elections. Before the elections, we knew that we were told by our researchers that we were going to get 43%. We worked very hard to jump that 43%, which we did not. And in our own projections with the work and the campaign and the fight we put up, we thought, like always, we will get maybe to 50%. It depends on 50%, it will be on 54 or what. We still have got to analyze what brought us to 40 and not above 43%. So that work is going to continue. And that work must then inform our program of action. But central to that program of action is the renewal program. To an extent, how people view the ANC, it will depend on what we do on the renewal program and that research itself to say what is it that we need to do right going forward as a party. And that is what is important we are going to do. National dialogue, it's an idea that has been put out there to build a consensus around national issues irrespective of ideological differences. What are those issues? And then it is a national dialogue idea we put out there before the elections and after, that it must mobilize civil society and all of that in terms of what are the key priorities for the country. And probably now it will pronounce itself in relation to the GNU itself. And post-election, what is it that needs to happen for South Africa going forward? So it's going to be important. It will be convened, I think, after the inauguration, because the inauguration is next week on Wednesday. And I suppose you are all invited. I'm not Ramaphosa will invite you, all of you, as the state president. But you know, you are gate crushers as the media. And then Sunday World, I don't have the list of parties, but I was signing now. But there's a couple of parties that have signed, and we'll be able to supply you with that list. of parties, and it is encouraging to see so many parties coming to the party in terms of signing. We have signed with the Democratic Alliance. We are signing with also other political parties in relation to the statement of intent. The parties that have refused to be part of the GNU, they are about, what? Three. They wanted a different arrangement of a government, a grand coalition. We don't believe in that, because that grand coalition must equally be defined. What is it in its intentions? What does it want to address? Our route is the route of engaging with everybody. Is this a tombstone decision? We don't think so. Of course, those who've got self-interest, who in the political landscape, through the numbers of elections, they've basically reached saturation. They have not shown growth. As much as we are going down, others have not shown growth in terms of their numbers. They've basically reached saturation. Even the bigger political parties, it doesn't seem that they will go beyond what they've been getting. As we go down, they benefit from that, from the subjective weaknesses of the governing party. It doesn't seem that those fortunes have actually favored them. The ANC have gone down. In our analysis, cursory, it tells us that the MK party have taken a chunk of our vote, and largely in KZN. But it doesn't show that other parties have benefited out of that. Zuma woke up and formed a party, and he called it Umkhonto Wesizwe. For the first time, it gave him 2.3 million people who voted for him. And then what is the benefit for the EFF out of that? Nothing. It has gone down in terms of numbers. What is the benefit for the DA? It has not gone beyond 20% in the electorate. As we go down, this elephant is falling, as they characterize it. And then we have seen new political parties breaking new grounds. But equally, they've not brought bigger numbers, as it would have been expected. Some political parties, if posters were to define the number of votes, they should be on the leaderboard. I mean, they were bigger than the ANC on the battle of posters. Nothing wrong, good strategy. Some had bigger billboards than us. But if billboards were to be defined as smaller parties that you can gain more votes, it didn't. We had a low voter turnout in our base areas. And we need to analyze, why did the people not come out when the queues were so long? We didn't register bigger numbers. We had more challenges in our base areas when it comes to encounters with the vote, education. People probably did not understand on the day that the Constitutional Court ruling means that you must vote where you have registered. And they thought that it is like the old election. So many people were turned away. And it's not the fault of the IC. That Mbalula, I rock up in Bloemfontein at Kukemur Street, where I was registered, and I arrived there, and I have not even paid attention to the rules of the election, that I will not vote anywhere else in the country except in Kukemur. And then I'm turned away when I get to Johannesburg on the voting day. Many people did not get that message. I'm sure you know that as a fact. Many people, and it affected our base areas. So it's not conclusive, that analysis, but it's important that we must look into it. But equally, were we affected by voter apathy in this election? we thought we had 20 million, we had 16 million people who voted. And the ANC got 6 million out of that, and the rest shared among themselves. So we need to look into that. So the decision that this is a tombstone decision, let me explain to you, we are not in a grand coalition, we are in a government of national unity. And the DA is part and parcel of that government of national unity. And we have negotiated and engaged with the DA in relation to that government of national unity. And we will do that also in municipalities around the country, so that we bring about stability in our approach. There's been an over-exaggerated distortion that the ANC is now working with the DA. Did you see that in relation to the outcome of yesterday? Ramaphosa was not voted only by the DA, even by those who said they are progressive, they are a bloc. They voted for the president. Let's use that as a measure in the National Assembly as the president of the country. So the cooperation and the maturity of the DA and the ANC to cooperate must be celebrated by South Africans. Must be celebrated by South Africans. And we can have a debate about that. Please organize a Zoom meeting. We have a debate on that. About, because we have ceased to debate since the advent of X. You just post something on X and then you trend. And then there is no discussion. We have killed the national debate in the country. When people analyze moments like this and the GNU, they are insulted. They are boxed. And then JJ is having a rant. And then that's it. It's a debate. I mean, it's shameful for the country like ours. We come from a rich history. Yabombeki, Bomondli Makanya, Bobutelezi, Umdagashenge, not afraid to write and analyze situation and exchange. Before we even arrived at the transitional mechanisms for South Africa, can you imagine what debate did we have through the strategic perspective led by Joe Slovo? In this country, we woke up one day, Nelson Mandela and the ANC delegation were at Mount Nelson Hotel, somewhere towards the Paarl in Stellenbosch, and they announced the Groteskir minute and the suspension of the armed struggle. Do you remember that? And then the ANC, it was said, is selling out at that particular moment. And I was part of a group of young people, Nabo Nomvola, but Nomvola is older than me. Don't, Musisi Wamdo. But much younger, Tina, Nabomdu, and many others, we said that how can the armed struggle be suspended? We went to the structures. The ANC leadership came to us. I remember arriving in a meeting with Peter Mugabe at 6 a.m. and we arrived late. And then the whole top 6 of the ANC was there, and Oliver Tambo and Walter Sisulu. You can imagine, Mawande. We arrived late because the previous night we didn't sleep. And then we arrived. And then the leadership explained to us the suspension of the armed struggle to the youth, because young people felt that, hey, this is a sellout position. Any leadership that is facing challenges and takes strategic decisions about the way forward, it must not be afraid of criticism, even from its ranks. Since when all ANC members think alike? And that's why I was telling SA2, this thing of protesting at the NEC rally is wrong. You've got a hotline with me. But why didn't you ask me, what do we think? You think protesting will resolve things? Uzap was also too DA and all of that. The moment we are in is not about moments of protest and threats. It's about thinking. We don't have a majority. We have lost the election actually. And it doesn't mean in the alliance and ourselves we must think alike. Anybody who says, but comrades, what is entailed in this GNU? We start to characterize him because me and we can't explain our decision. We say these comrades are wrong. They must be brought to the DC. The leadership that is elected analyzes and take decisions and risks. The moment we are in is inherent with risks. Inali Bariking Yatlaba. Collins Chaban likes that song. Inzima Lendlela Inameva Yatlaba. And therefore, what do? We have taken a strategic decision to form a GNU, which will explain to our membership what does it mean. And we have explained to South Africans what does it mean. And it's not going to be hamstrung, that debate and discussion, by slogans and rhetoric and empty slogans. It's not. Revolution is not led by slogans. The ideology of the ANC must not be distorted in the meantime. To equate the ANC as a black political party, we are not ASAPO. We are not PAC. We are Pan-Africanist. We are not Freedom Front, to be extreme. We are the African National Congress, multi-ideological party. In our ranks, we've got capitalists. Capitalists. Today, we are blessed that the capitalist color in the ANC have also become black, albeit a minority. Secondly, we live in a capitalist society that we seek to transform. And the measures we put in place to transform the economy, to bring about equitability in the South African society, is the idea the ANC is pursuing. You can characterize that as social democracy. But the ANC is not communist. That's why there is a communist party. We don't pronounce socialism. So when Soli does not agree with things that we do as the liberation movement, as the ANC, he can't be wrong, because ideologically, that's what they are pursuing. And we have come together through an alliance, knowing very well that this liberation struggle is led Hukalele Payin, the ANC. But if you want to become a communist and pursue a socialist agenda and a classless, pure classless society, you belong in the Communist Party. But if you are a Democrat, you belong in the ANC. Uguti mna dilapa matod, andi pambila dilapa. You belong in the African National Congress. That's who we are. We are unique in that sense in the world. So we must not be classified as a black political party. Yes, in terms of the content of the National Democratic Revolution, we are pursuing, in the main, the liberation of blacks in general and Africans in particular, within the paradigm of a society that is racialized and all of that, where we seek to address the inequalities by ensuring that we pursue the agenda, among others, of nation building and addressing all of those particular issues that affect the national question in our country. So we can't be classified like that. We are not a party narrowly that pursue those ideas, but it doesn't make us friends with the DA, because the DA has got its own ideology and outlook. But the DA is a strategic opponent of the ANC. Strategic opponent. In our political landscape, we've got adversaries that we don't agree with, and that include the DA and the EFF. EFF, by merely espousing and verbosing an idea of blackness, it doesn't make us an ideological ally. as the ANC, because they could be something that we don't know and what we define ourselves. But the fundamental question before us is, here is an election, what do we do about it, and who comes to the party, and that is it. If we want to argue ideology, let's do that. And you will realize that if we were to do that, we are way apart with each other. When we ask the question of colonialism of a special type, we don't know where they stand. When we ask the question of non-racialism, we don't know where they stand. At least you know where the ANC stands on the question of non-racialism and everything else, and the colonialism of a special type. Let's start there and ask everybody else, where do they start? We are not ideologically close with the DA. It is our strategic opponent, like all others, including those who think they've got left leaning and black. They are not our friends. They have shown to be populist, at best anarchist of the West order, with no ideology in perpetuity. They don't know what they stand for. If you come to them and say, let's pass a law about death penalty, they say, it looks like it will win us votes, let's go. We don't work like that. We never went to the people and say, let's sign for death penalty, let's do this thing. We are not like that, because we've got an ideology. We stand for something. That's what we stand for as the African National Congress. And we have worked with the DA in coalitions in the Western Cape. We have worked with the IFP in coalitions in KwaZulu-Natal when Nelson Mandela was alive. And we went back and reclaimed KwaZulu-Natal from the IFP, and we led. There's nothing new out of that. We made choices ourselves that we don't go to the back benches as much as we are there, but we'll also get into the executive. We worked with the IFP. So where was this ideological issue? We lost the Western Cape when we were in the coalition, and we lost after the DA here in the Western Cape. And then we were politically annihilated. The SACP is our ally. They've got robust views, and then they persuade us ideologically and otherwise. We listen to them. We've delivered the first phase of the GNU through the legislatures. We are moving to the second one. We've got a strategic debate and discussion we are going to have with our allies on our own about what then must be this GNU in terms of content and form. And that belongs to the ANC and our allies. It's a debate. So don't be deterred by people and ANC activists who raised their strategic perspective about this moment and the decisions we've taken. Nomvula have clarified, we are going to our structures in the next coming weeks, and they will definitely come with their viewpoints. We must listen to them. But there's nothing that says in terms of the ANC constitution, and we are not constitutionalists. Steve Tshwete says to us, speaking from the grave, use the constitution to think. Use the constitution to build. Don't use it to curtail debate. So we must listen. We must not say democratic centralism says to us we take decisions. Yes, we have. But at the same time, we must listen. We are going to listen to our structures. Those who are on Facebook and media and what I characterize as armchair critics, they are people who never campaigned on door-to-door. But today they want to tell us that don't work with so and so. But they never even wore the T-shirt of the president. At best in this campaign, they were critics. They were opponents. They were advocating for the destruction of the ANC. Today, when we are below 50, they want to answer the question, what is to be done? And then they say, in their reductionist thoughts and the distortion of the ANC ideology, that no, confine yourself in a locker room with us. But when they were doing whatever they were doing, they did not consult with us. What if they've got crooks in their list who will demand to become ministers? What are we going to do? What if they've got people with questionable backgrounds who will want Ramaphosa to appoint them in cabinet? Because they've got the vote, they've brought us below, we must now succumb to that. We're not negotiating with anybody with the hand in the cap. We will engage politically, soberly, and at the same time, we will use the mandate we have got to deepen not only democracy but social transformation in our country. And COSATU and everybody don't have to worry and second guess us about what will happen to worker rights and all of that. DA might have its own ideas. They are not our partners. They are our strategic opponents who have agreed in the interest of the country, let's work together. Otherwise, they too could have taken a different option. But nobody can govern here alone, including the ANC. And nobody can govern this country without us, because 6 million people said, you cannot. And that's it. So we are not begging each other. We are matured. We respect each other. We talk to each other. We know our boundaries. We know our principles, and we'll die with them. And that's what is important. So we must not be blackmailed by armchair critics who have never contributed to the ANC victory and today want to give us a big lecture about what must happen to the National Democratic Revolution. When you tweet every day and you say things about everything else that you say, that this ANC of Ramaphosa must be brought down, you should have known the implications. And we told them that you are putting the NDR in a position of vulnerability. Now, we are sitting here, we have campaigned, we have gone to our people, they've given us what we wanted. A responsible party like the ANC says, let's work together. We are working for our people, we work for the country, and we learn from our mistakes. It is time to build trust with the people of South Africa. And for that, we are not going to compromise. And this is what this election have told us. And we thank all political parties and everybody else in our way forward to building a government of national unity and working for peace and stability of our nation. As I repeat myself, no blood was shed since the 29th. All our people accepted the result, painful as they are to some who thought that we will emerge victorious, but South Africans have said, go and work together. Yesterday was a celebration in South Africa, like never before. It was our 1994, what others wished for. That this election is our 1994. Indeed, this was our 1994, and then we came out of it with flying colors, and we will continue to engage with everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you, SG. I am certain that that was a very comprehensive response. At this point, I'd like to thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the media, for journeying with us during this time, and we are adjourned.
Thank you.
All right, we'll come out live from the briefing. The ANC Secretary General, Fikile Mbalula, very comprehensive report. Still have Dr. Hlengiwe Ndlovu with us in studio, political analyst here. Plenty, a mouthful, right? And I'm sure you have a number of things perhaps you'd like to jump on, but quite noticeable, the SG's demeanor was very, very somber and contained perhaps about 7 days ago. And suddenly he's back to perhaps his usual self, taking jabs at a number of political parties as well. I imagine he's quite relieved that yesterday went well. You know, he was also saying that yesterday was quite the milestone.
Yeah, absolutely, Sebe. We even have a new concept that is going around all over, strategic opponent.
Yes, what does that mean, strategic opponent?
We are here to see, because that's the concept that he uses to describe the relationship between the ANC and the DA.
Yeah.
But I think you are quite right in terms of his mood has quite changed. I mean, he comes here very, very confident than ever in the past. few days since the 29th, because I think the 29th was quite a humbling moment for the ANC. And coming here today after yesterday, I think someone tweeted like his usual his usual pickup line. Someone tweeted that the ANC emerged victorious in these elections, despite the fact that, they dipped it too low. So it's quite interesting to see where this confidence takes us to from here.
On the issue, I think, of ideology here, given where the country is currently, the issues that were raised throughout the campaign trail, issues of unemployment, service delivery, and so on, you didn't hear a lot about ideology. So does this perhaps say that the decision that the ANC has taken, at least up until this point as well, to focus on the key issues of, industrialization, work, tackling issues of high cost of living and so on, that it actually speaks to the concerns that voters and those who in fact also didn't vote had raised throughout the campaign trail, and it's not just about issues of ideology?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, there is a lot to digest from these relationships, whether you want to call it a coalition or you want to call it a strategic alliance or a GNU, there is a lot. But I think what is coming out, from this speech, but also from what we've been hearing on the space, we need a serious critical moment of reflection in terms of what it means. And while Mbalula was speaking there, I was thinking of the 2026 local government elections, and then I said to myself, that will be a reflection moment for the ANC. If they haven't done one or two things here, they should learn something about some of these decisions, because he keeps on saying 6 million people, and he keeps on saying we are listening to the people, but we don't actually know who are these people. Of course people voted, the numbers are there, but in terms of where are they standing in the current debate, we are not quite sure. He says they will go back to the structures and take some directive, and then I'm asking what use would it be, because now decisions have been made. And I think these concerns are raised really from a historical moment, and also it actually pushes us to ask ourselves, what is representative democracy and what is the relevance of representative democracy in this age and time, especially in this situation that we find ourselves as a country.
Does the ANC and the political parties that receive the nod from the elected and are represented in parliament, do they have the legitimacy to lead a national dialogue in this time? Because a lot of people didn't turn up at the polls, right? They perhaps felt that of the options that were presented to them, that none of them was in fact good enough to in fact address their concerns. There's a lot of voter apathy. Just people have disengaged, and maybe they're not represented by, whether it's the labor movement, whether it's civil society as well. Who actually has the legitimacy to speak to those people?
Well, this is quite a difficult moment for us as South Africans, and you would imagine that, of course, we've got a constitution that's guiding and everything, but we are in a completely new era. We wake up to a completely new political landscape that we described as a seismic shift in terms of what it means. So, there wasn't quite time. So ordinarily you'll have, these 14 days to make decisions and all of that. But at the same time you ask, did we have a moment to even reflect on the election results, the turnout at the polls? Of course, there are technical issues that I found some of the statements quite disturbing, given the level of literacy in our country, the level of reaching, especially people from the rural areas, how people migrate even within the country due to unemployment, informal settlements and all of that, and to throw out a statement like that to say people were not careful, people were not aware. So you're asking also those people who might have wanted to vote but did not have an opportunity to, but also those who sat at home and did not vote. What does it mean? Are they presented. What does this conversation even mean? And I was saying, if we do not see change, from what happened yesterday moving forward, it might be the end of the voting era in South Africa.
For political parties, perhaps the MKP, for one, given there are many who would have woken up today and surprised that there's an IFP premier there and not somebody coming from the MKP. Some saying that they fumbled and they fumbled royally, and perhaps similar sentiments are shared about the performance of the likes of the EFF and others perhaps who are expecting to perform a lot better at the polls, and they didn't. Do you agree? Did they fumble? Is this why Fikile Mbalula is as jovial and as cocky as he is today?
The question of fumbling, I think it's yet to be debated, right? The outcomes of KZN yesterday, when they were on their first sitting, it pushes us to question democracy. What does democracy mean? And I go back to representative democracy. 1.5 million people of KZN voted for the MK.
Yeah.
But the political alliances, the numbers, the merits did not count. Where are the citizens in this? Perhaps I think these results from these elections are loud enough to say people are tired of the status quo. People have not gained anything much tangible or progressive, at least to say, from 1994. And we are at a crossroads. At 30 years, we need to reflect in terms of how far we've come. So, those outcomes are actually to say these are the options that were for us as South Africans. I think for the first time we got 31 new political parties coming in. What do they represent? Who do they represent? And, are these numbers really about fumbling? I'm not quite sure if it will be a fair analysis or assessment, but also it means something, for the voters at home and their decisions and all of that.
Yeah. Let's talk about the markets. Who seem perhaps to like what is happening. The ASG characterizes it as the first stage. They've delivered the first stage of forming this new government. They got a president elected yesterday. They got their speaker the day, got a deputy speaker in the National Assembly. These markets that seem to always, South Africa is often threatened by these forces that are quite sensitive, but clearly they're happy now.
Yes, quite not shocking. I think we've been here, and when I want to think about the ANC, I want to think about it. I want to think about the democratic transition within the 1994 moment, that period between 1990 to 1994. That transition that coincided with the triumph of capitalism, which is the end of the Cold War, and where it puts us today. But to pick up from, I think when Mbalula was having that address, I said, these are some of the speeches that need to be archived because they will be important in the next years to reflect. So for the first time, he came out, very boldly to say this is not a black party, right? Of which it is one of the arguments that I've been making to say, go back to 1912 when the ANC was formed.
Right.
It was never a working class party. It was a middle class party, and it continues. And he himself speak about the ideological differences between the Youth League and the motherboard of the ANC and how they've differed ideologically. So today he comes here, and the narrative that has been sold to us was the coalition or alliance or strategic opponent, whatever, between the ANC and the DA, then it becomes favorable for the markets. And we are yet to see if, because in 2017, when President Cyril Ramaphosa was sold to the people, we were told that he's favored by the market. Have the markets favored us? In 5 years, we're not quite sure. But I think the important part is that the DA is now no longer on the opposition bench. They are now governing. And some of these questions that they've been asking and everything, and whether the markets will respond to the DA or not, we will see. Do we need to change the face of governance in order for the markets to respond, or we need to fix the economy? Those are two separate things, and we are yet to see how, the two political parties and everyone else who is part of this conversation, they are going to strategically transform the economy.
There was quite a bit of optimism, not only on the front of the markets, as we're speaking about now, but a number of people, I think, in society excited about the opportunity that's presented here. But as you listen, it almost sounds as though there'll be much much of the same, much of what we've seen just over the last couple of years. And for people who have been yearning and longing for change in their lives for the last 30 years, it'll be very disappointing that really the thought that they're just going to receive much of the same. So what might perhaps be the levers of opportunity that may actually, where we can sit here in 5 years' time and say, here's a section of society whose lives have truly transformed, perhaps for the first time in 30 or 35 years, if we speak in the future?
So I've always said the more we change, the more we remain the same.
Yeah.
I don't know if you hear what I mean.
Really.
Yeah. The more we remain the same.
Yeah.
So if we want to understand this change, what does this change mean? Who is in governance right now?
Yeah.
Has the ANC changed anything in the past 30 years? It's a debate. What are the gains? What are the shortfalls? How much have we gained and how much we've regressed? They are coming back to govern. If we want to understand whether the DA is capable of bringing change, let's go back to the Western Cape. They've been governing there, for quite a considerable number of years. Ask people in Khayelitsha and other, our communities there, whether they've experienced the true change. And that will sort of like give us a picture of where are we headed to with this.
Yeah.
But also I think this was a moment, I know we are politicizing it and everything, but this was a moment of reflection, not only, for South Africans, but also for political parties to take a step back and say, what do these results from the elections mean? What are the South Africans saying? Because the sad reality is that in this representative democracy, we elect people, we put them there. They take decisions without going back to consult, to say, actually, what do these numbers mean in real terms? So the reality is that these political parties have detached from the ground.
Yes.
They've lost touch and all of that. So it will be useful to see how they go back to the people and then bring them along. But if they continue business as usual, we're most likely to be here again 5 years later.
He also mentioned that a key part also of the statement of intent was about a progressive foreign policy, saying that their foreign policy stance will remain progressive. What does that actually look like here? And of course, Palestine, Israel will come to mind for people. We know where the DA stands with that, and some of the statements have been made in that regard, even though just over the last couple of months they've been rather quiet about those issues. Dr. Naledi Pandor is no longer going to occupy that position. She's no longer in Parliament as well. She has retired from public service. Can that be perhaps an area where we're likely to see some sort of a shift or a compromise as a result of this new marriage between the ANC and the DA?
Look, I did hear Mbalula dismissing the ideology question. And I think it's very key to say when they emerge as strategic partners in this, formation, they need to find each other in terms of the foreign policy in particular. So you've already mentioned Israel, Palestine, that one is out there. But we also have BRICS and the new bloc of countries who've just joined the BRICS. The position of the DA and the ANC in the Russia-Ukraine war currently, and Russia forming part of the bloc, of the BRICS bloc, and including some of the new entrants into the BRICS bloc, the oil producing companies of which we believe, we need as South Africa. But also looking at within the continent, we know that the ANC-led government has been really patient with the issues on the continent. We know the DA stance on the DRC issue and other deployments, of our own resources within the continent. So it's a big question in terms of do we maintain that leadership position within the continent, because we are relatively within the continent a big economy. So it was imperative that we take that leadership position. But now that we have these two big blocks coming together, and also the other worry, I think, within these parties that have been, named to be working together, your IFP, your PA, your FF Plus, and all of that, we know that they are pushing to the right-wing politics. And the right-wing politics has seemed to be quite disturbing in terms of some of the issues that we as South Africans, relate with, especially within the continent and also globally within the global south.
We'll get a sense of what the makeup of that cabinet will look like over the next couple of days? We've spoken a bit now about the foreign policy, the international relations and cooperation ministry. Which others do you think may result in some unfamiliar, interesting faces, perhaps, comprising this new cabinet of the 7th administration?
Well, I think it is quite difficult to speculate for now, because, you know, these conversations are still ongoing. We don't know who's shut out and who's coming into the process. But I think we've had, the Patriotic Alliance being really out front about them wanting Home Affairs. And I think we've had this conversation, and then we'll be like, if I was in that position, I was going to give them the Home Affairs. But that's when they were going to discover that there is a constitution, there are rules, there are legislation that are governing these things.
Right.
And I think Balula did say that it's not easy to change these things because...
Right. And Home Affairs isn't just about border control, right? There's a lot more.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a lot more. And even, you know, the economy that they're talking about, attracting investors speaks to the Home Affairs. And we'll see what that means, and whether there is even an understanding of some of these things that these political parties are politicking about.
Yeah. All right, we have to leave it there this afternoon. Thank you very much for your time with us this afternoon. Dr. Hlengiwe, global political analyst, our guest right here on the Week in Review. Do stay with us. We'll have more for you after this. Thank you for staying with us. Preparations for the inauguration of the president-elect is currently underway. President Cyril Ramaphosa will be inaugurated next week, Wednesday. For more, we're joined by Kailihle Khumalo, who is at the GCIS in Pretoria. Kailihle, very good afternoon to you. You are in Pretoria this afternoon for a media briefing on the state of readiness for the inauguration next week. What can we expect? Good afternoon.
Well, a very good afternoon to you, Sabenzile. So this is an absolutely important time for South Africa as the political tectonic plates are shifting, but also a culmination point will have to be the inauguration. So a very important time in terms of the political calendar, where also you do have quite a number of foreign guests, the heads of states within the SADC bloc, many other regional organizations, United Nations, and many other heads of states as well, who will be invited to come to South Africa. As you know that it's 30 years of democratic dispensation in South Africa. So there's a sense of pride as well. So we're going to hear from the Interministerial Committee that is overseeing the program in terms of the nitty-gritty and just in terms of the expectations, but also more importantly, the issue of security is always very fundamental in terms of making sure that everything runs smoothly. And, you know, you go back to 2019 where Loftus Stadium was used for the very first time in South Africa as opposed to the Union buildings. But in terms of those details, we're going to hear from the Ministers of International Relations and Cooperation, the Minister in the Presidency, and several ministers as well in terms of really just comprehensive details around this very momentous occasion in South Africa.
Well, many perhaps are still trying to come to terms perhaps with the result of the election on the 29th of May. These processes are kicking in, and when they kick in, they do so very quickly. We saw the first sitting of Parliament yesterday, the NCOP today as well, and now we, of course, moving quite speedily to the inauguration as well. But for those who handle preparations, they've been at it. They knew all of this is coming and coming very quickly. It is often quite a fancy affair with a very high-profiled guest list as well at this stage. And I know we're minutes away from this briefing in particular, but do we know, Kailihle, who will be in attendance? Heads of state, other high-profiled figures from the international community?
Well, that's right, Sebenzile. It's always a very formal ceremony, especially for also the president also gets an opportunity to outline the program of action for the 7th administration in this case. So we're still waiting keenly to hear in terms of the key figures who will be descending into South Africa. But also, I think what is very important at this point in time is that the issue around the 30 years of democracy in South Africa is going to be a very key theme, especially looking at the achievements of South Africa, some of the successes, some of the challenges, but also reflecting on the journey and taking stock of what is yet to be done. But also something that is quite important in this regard is that there's quite a great deal of pride associated with this day, where also you have so many guests coming through. But as for the very comprehensive details, we're still keenly waiting. So we do believe the briefing will be happening around 2 p.m.
Thank you very much, Kailihle Khumalo. Coming to us live from Pretoria. Do stay tuned. We expect that briefing to get underway at 2 p.m. To this now, Malawi's Vice President Saulos Chilima and 9 other people died on Monday when a military aircraft they were traveling in crashed in bad weather in a mountainous region in the north of the country. Chilima was 51 years old and had been Vice President since 2014, having served a first term in the role under former President Peter Mutharika. For more on this, we're joined by SABC News International Editor Sophie Mokoena. Very good afternoon to you, Sophie. Where are we currently now with understanding what actually happened there, but also perhaps some reflections on the role that the now late Chilima played in the politics of Malawi?
Well, the president of Malawi, Lazarus Chakwera, has appointed a team that is looking into this matter, and we are told that the family of the vice president also made recommendations in terms of how that team must be constituted in terms of independent people with independent expertise, so that everybody is happy. And we know that his funeral will be this coming Monday, and therefore, as we speak, while the investigations are underway, they are also now preparing for the funeral on Monday.
Chilima was certainly viewed as really an embodiment of a new generation of young, charismatic or younger and charismatic politicians in Malawi. We saw also when the news came in the devastation from not only members within his political party, but also the country broadly. But he wasn't without scandal as well. Let's perhaps talk a bit more about the allegations of corruption and how that might have impacted his legacy.
Well, you are aware that he was facing cases of corruption, but on the 6th of May, those cases, we are told that they were thrown out, and therefore he wasn't facing any case at this moment or before he passed on. But some people are skeptic about why at that time, because you know that the current government of Malawi, you had 2 parties coming together to work together. That is Lazarus Chakwera and Chilima. And unfortunately, there were wranglings towards early this year based on what transpired. And therefore, he had indicated to those who were close to him that he was going to contest President Chakwera next year. And because there was an agreement, apparently, when they formed that alliance or a coalition, that President Chakwera was going to take 1 term and he would then follow. And therefore, there were those dynamics. Now, many people are saying, indeed, there was some concerns in terms of how he conducted himself in relation to corruption, but others are saying this was just a way to make him experience challenges in his contest for the highest office in the land. And also, you know that he was an administrator, he was a technocrat with strong business acumen. And therefore, in terms of his work, he was more focused on delivering and changing the situation in Malawi as a VP. As you know, that he was also assigned to go to South Korea, where South Korea invited heads of state and government from the African continent. And therefore, he was more of a technocrat and a shrewd administrator.
When the president, Chakwera, in a briefing really announcing this death, he at some point was at pains to talk about how this particular aircraft had been used, he'd used it previously as well, almost trying, if you will, to allay any concerns or fears that perhaps that there may have been, some or other hand involved here. And now we're seeing that Malawi's opposition Alliance for Democracy has called on the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres and major African organizations to form a commission to thoroughly investigate this crash that killed the vice president here. What is your take? Is this again perhaps showing that people don't trust that this was a mere crash due to bad weather and that perhaps something else was at play here?
Because of the political situation in that country, as I pointed out, that apparently there was an agreement that President Lazarus Chakwera will take a term and then he will then follow. And as a build-up to next year where Malawi is going to the polls, there was the wrangling in terms of him having to start his campaign. And therefore, you will have these conspiracies. And you know that when you have a situation like this, people will always call for independent investigations. And therefore, I think it is from that perspective that you'll find that his party and those who are very close to him have called on these organizations to be involved, because you know that this was something that was really shocking. It was a big story. Questions are raised. Why did you allow him to use this aircraft when the weather wasn't good? And also the delay in terms of the search and to communicate what was happening at that moment, raising concerns from those who were very close to him. So I think in a normal setting, those who are close to the affected person will always call for independent investigations. And of course, his party will do the same. As we speak now, I don't even know what's going to happen, because remember now, because this was an alliance in terms of the administration of Malawi, whether they've already discussed the issue of transition, whether the next VP will come from the same party. So these are the issues that are creating those conspiracies.
Indeed, indeed. We'll leave it there this afternoon. Thank you very much. That was the SABC's international editor, Sophie Mokoena. That's our time this afternoon. Thank you very much for watching. Do remember to stay tuned for that briefing on the readiness of the inauguration of the president-elect next week, Wednesday. Until next time, take care.